What you're seeing right now is not Mars. Well, it kind of looks like Mars, but this is actually Earth. And if you want to know how old it is, well, all you need to do is look up to the sky. Those aren't clouds, they're thunderheads. They've been brewing for millions of years. You're looking at the skies of the Triassic period, a time when weird reptiles walked slowly across the dry ground and Earth looked nothing like it does today. No lush rainforests, no giant mammals, not even any birds. The Triassic is a glimpse into our past, a window into the days before the age of mammals or birds. It's a time when Earth was still recovering from the greatest mass extinction in history. And most life on Earth was struggling to survive until suddenly, from the ashes, rose the dinosaurs. And we are going to go back in time to see their incredible rise to power and show you what the Triassic period was really like. Let's time travel! Here we are then. Earth in the Triassic period, also known as the third period of the Mesozoic era. It started about 252 million years ago and lasted until about 201 million years ago. So it was quite a long time ago, longer than you might think. But don't worry, we've got you covered because we've packed over 200 million years of history into this video. Let's get started. If you were to visit Earth in the Triassic period, you'd be met with a huge supercontinent, a gigantic landmass that stretched from pole to pole. Its name was Pangaea, which means all Earth in Greek, and all of Earth it was. One entire landmass surrounded by a single world ocean. The supercontinent was surrounded by a huge inland sea called Tethys. Pangaean land was largely desert. It was cracked and weathered, worn down by wind and rain. There were some mountains, sure, but nothing compared to today. Even the famous Rocky Mountains were fully formed in the Triassic, towering giants compared to the tiny mountain chains of the time. The climate was hot, hotter than it is now, with almost half the planet located inside the tropics. This led to extreme temperatures and heavy rainfall, meaning there were lots of rivers and lakes. It was humid, sticky, and downright hot. Not exactly what you'd want in a climate. It's amazing to think that such inhospitable conditions could give rise to the dinosaurs. But hey, Earth has changed a lot since then. There were no flowering plants yet, no pollinators, just a few hardy ferns and conifers clinging to life. Most plants were just woody bushes. But there were some impressive tree-like plants called lycopods that grew as tall as modern-day giraffes. As for the animals, well, let's just say the Triassic was a rough neighborhood. Crocodiles and their relatives were everywhere, dominating the rivers and lakes. Huge amphibians lurked in the murky swamps, and the skies were filled with flying reptiles. In short, it was a nightmare for any new life trying to get a foothold. Dinosaurs, however, were up for the challenge. We don't know exactly when dinosaurs evolved, but we do know that they were around by the Triassic began. Their origins are still being debated. But they were definitely here, and they were definitely different from today's birds and reptiles. Early dinosaurs like Eoraptor were much closer to crocodiles than they were to birds. They weren't feathered yet, but they did walk on two legs and had small heads with sharp teeth. They were also fast, nimble, and small, maybe around the size of a dog. Eoraptor, one of the earliest known dinosaurs, was just 1 meter tall and weighed around 90 kilograms. It lived in what is now Argentina and was a true survivor. The Triassic was a tough time to be alive, but Eoraptor managed to find enough food and stay out of trouble. After Eoraptor, there were others like Herrerasaurus and Coelophysis. They were faster and smarter than their cold-blooded cousins, able to run down prey and hunt in packs. As the Triassic progressed, dinosaurs diversified. They got bigger and stronger. By the end of the Triassic, the stage was set for them to take over. There was no mass extinction, no asteroid impact, no volcanic eruption to wipe out competition. At least that's what we thought. In reality, the Triassic ended with a bang, literally. Around 201 million years ago, a series of volcanic eruptions in what is now the western United States released enormous amounts of lava and gases into the atmosphere. The lava flowed for thousands of years, covering huge areas of land. But the real damage was done by the gases. They blocked out the sun, causing global cooling and massive climate change. There was a mass extinction, and those who survived were left to inherit the earth. Dinosaurs, with their efficient metabolism and adaptability, were perfectly suited to the changing world. Other groups struggled, like the amphibians. Too much water, too little water, too cold, too hot. It didn't matter. They were doomed. So when you hear people talk about how dinosaurs took over after the extinction, well, that's not entirely true. Sure, they inherited a changed world, but it was thanks to their own adaptations that they thrived. They were already well suited to the environment, and they simply took advantage of the opportunities that came their way. Still, it's a good thing the asteroid didn't hit until after the Triassic. Otherwise, we might never have gotten to see what dinosaurs could have become. Let's fast forward a bit, shall we? Don't worry, we won't leave you hanging. We know you want to see the epic landscapes and creatures of the Jurassic and Cretaceous periods, but we need to cover a few more things first. Let's finish the Triassic, shall we? As the supercontinent Pangaea began to break apart, it created new coastlines, new climates, and new opportunities. This led to major changes in the distribution of plants and animals. New species evolved, others went extinct. It was a time of great upheaval and change, but dinosaurs thrived. They spread across the globe, hunting and gathering, eating plants and smaller animals. Some became fast hunters, others strong herbivores. By the end of the Triassic, dinosaurs were the dominant land animals on Earth. They were found on every continent and came in a variety of shapes and sizes. The biggest was a type called sauropods, which means lizard feet. Sauropods were huge, up to 40 meters long and weighing several tons. These gentle giants were the first true dinosaurs, the ones that made the Triassic a dinosaur era. And so it should come as no surprise that we'll be featuring them in our next episode. Join us as we explore the dawn of the sauropods, the largest animals to ever walk the earth. See the first titanosaurs emerge and witness the rise of the long-necked behemoths that will shape the Jurassic period. Don't miss it. But for now, it's time to say goodbye to the Triassic. We hope you enjoyed this whirlwind tour of one of Earth's most fascinating eras. If you did, make sure to subscribe for more updates. And while you're at it, why not check out our other videos? We've got everything from the age of mammals to the birth of the universe. There's something for everyone. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time. In our last episode, we saw how the Triassic ended with a mass extinction that killed off many species and left the door open for new life to emerge. And that new life would come to dominate our planet for the next 180 million years, or at least until they didn't. We're talking, of course, about the dinosaurs. Welcome to Life of the Dinosaurs. Today we're going to talk about the Jurassic period, which came after the Triassic and before the Cretaceous, which I will discuss in another episode. During the Jurassic, we are introduced to some very iconic dinosaurs like Stegosaurus and Brachiosaurus, but also get to see the start of other stories like Allosaurus, Ankylosaurus, and Camptosaurus. It is during this time that the dinosaurs truly began to shine. So let's jump back in time and see what they were up against. This title card says it all. After surviving the turbulent Triassic period, dinosaurs were ready to thrive. Now, in the Jurassic, about 200 million years ago, Earth was greener, wetter, and louder. This was a time of giants. Indeed, if there is one thing that the Jurassic period was known for, it was its giants. We begin this journey with a herd of sauropods moving through a green and lush landscape. Towering above the trees, Brachiosaurus stretched its neck nearly 40 feet high. With such a long neck, they were capable of reaching the tops of the tallest trees to eat their favorite leaves. Sauropods like Brachiosaurus were probably the most famous and most loved dinosaurs. That's because today we know them mostly as these giant behemoths with really long necks. But don't worry, we'll talk more about Brachiosaurus and other sauropods in another episode. For now, just know that they were big and nice and walked on 4 legs. They were also very social animals who traveled in herds like elephants and also liked to keep each other company. So they rarely strayed too far from their group. But when they did, they had to watch their step because there were dangers around every corner. On the ground below, armored plant eaters like Stegosaurus roamed in groups. Their plated backs and spiked tails offered protection from predators. The Stegosaurus was definitely one of the coolest looking dinosaurs. It is easily recognizable by its large plates running down its back and its distinctive spiked tail. While their diet consisted mostly of plants, scientists do believe that they were not entirely herbivorous and that they may have supplemented their diets with insects and small animals. They also lived in herds for safety, kind of like the sauropods, but they preferred the safety and numbers provided by a herd of friends over the peace of mind you might get from being part of a larger group. As the sauropods moved through the forest, a lone Brachiosaurus wandered off from the main group. It was a young one, barely out of its teens, and it struggled to keep up with the rest of the herd. The adult Brachiosaurus continued on, munching on the tasty vegetation at the top of the trees. But this little guy wasn't so graceful. Its legs were still gangly, and it often tripped over its own feet. But the young Brachiosaurus wasn't completely helpless. Despite its awkward gait, it was still agile enough to scramble up trees and snatch leaves from the branches. It was a good thing too, because although the Jurassic period was wet and green, food wasn't always easy to come by. As the young Brachiosaurus munched on its leafy breakfast, it suddenly froze. It had heard a strange noise, a low growl that seemed to come from the trees behind it. The sound sent a shiver down its spine, and it quickly climbed higher up the tree, trying to get a better look at what was out there. What it saw made its heart race. It was a pair of glowing eyes staring back at it from the forest floor. The dinosaur froze, unsure of what to do. It knew that if it stayed in the tree, it wouldn't be safe for long. So it slowly climbed down and began to make its way back to the herd. It had to get away from here, from whatever was lurking in those dark trees. As it ran, it could hear the rustling of leaves and the snapping of twigs. Whatever was out there was following it, and then it saw it. Emerging from the trees was a large theropod, a carnivorous dinosaur with sharp teeth and claws. The creature was tall and slender with long legs that propelled it forward with ease. Its head was narrow and pointed with a long snout that ended in a sharp beak. The theropod took a step toward the young Brachiosaurus and let out a low growl. The herbivore froze in its tracks, unsure of what to do. It was trapped between the jaws of a predator and the dense undergrowth of the forest. Just then, the theropod lunged, but it wasn't after the Brachiosaurus. Instead, it leaped at a smaller animal that had been hiding in the bushes. The herbivore was a young Comptosaurus, a kind of dinosaur that looked like a mix between a Stegosaurus and a Brachiosaurus. The theropod had been stalking it for some time, and it wasn't about to let it get away. The young Camptosaurus squealed in terror as the predator closed in on it. Its efforts to flee were futile. It was too slow, and the underbrush was too thick. The theropod was upon it in a flash, and it was over in seconds. The carnivore stood over its prey, panting heavily. It had made a kill, but it wasn't done yet. It began to tear into its victim, ripping off chunks of flesh with its sharp teeth. The sight was gruesome, and the young Brachiosaurus could only watch in horror. The killer turned out to be an Allosaurus, one of the most successful carnivores of its time. Despite being neither the biggest nor the meanest carnivore in history, the Allosaurus was a formidable hunter. Its jaws were lined with razor-sharp teeth that could easily slice through flesh and bone, and its strong hind legs allowed it to move swiftly and powerfully. It could reach speeds of up to 30 miles per hour, making it one of the fastest carnivores of its time. Although it preferred to hunt alone, the Allosaurus was also capable of hunting in packs, working together to take down large prey. As a pack, they were unstoppable, able to bring down even the largest sauropod. When the young Brachiosaurus finally broke away from the scene, it knew it had to find the herd. It ran as fast as it could, its heart pounding in its chest. But the forest was dark and thick, and it was hard to see. Just when it thought it couldn't go on any longer, it heard a familiar sound, the low rumble of its mother's voice. It followed the sound, and soon enough it saw the rest of the herd lumbering through the undergrowth. They were close. It cried out as loud as it could, and its mother turned and saw it. She let out a loud bellow and quickly joined her baby, nuzzling it with her long neck. The other dinosaurs in the herd also turned and stared at the Brachiosaurus. They were curious about what had happened to it. The young Brachiosaurus nuzzled his mother's leg and let out a sigh of relief. He was safe now. The other members of the herd also lumbered over and surrounded him, their huge bodies blocking out the darkness. Together, they faced whatever lay ahead. As the Jurassic continued, the world reshaped itself. Pangaea broke into smaller continents. New climates formed. Rainforests grew. Oceans rose. And dinosaurs adapted with every shift. Life was still full of challenges. Juveniles were vulnerable. Food could be scarce. And predators waited for any sign of weakness. Only the strong or the smart survived. And it wasn't just the land. The skies were filled with soaring pterosaurs. And in the ocean swam massive marine reptiles like Ichthyosaurus and Pliosaurus. Life flourished everywhere. The Jurassic was an age of growth. But the world was far from finished. In the next episode, we'll enter the Cretaceous, where evolution takes its wildest turn yet. Thanks for joining me on this journey back to the Jurassic. I hope you enjoyed learning about some of the amazing creatures that lived during this time period. The Jurassic was truly an age of giants, but also of great challenges. These dinosaurs had to contend with everything from food shortages to dangerous predators. But they were also able to experience the wonders of a lush, green world and soar through the skies on the wings of evolution. If you want to learn more about dinosaurs, check out my channel where we explore the fascinating world of these ancient creatures. We have videos on all sorts of topics, from the latest discoveries to the most popular theories. So join us and learn all about dinosaurs. We've got a brand new episode of Life of the Dinosaurs coming at you today. Let's get right to it. Episode 3, Cretaceous Kingdom. Our Cretaceous story begins with a bright sunrise over a vibrant landscape. Flowering plants adorn the hillsides while insects buzz among them, collecting pollen. A herd of colorful dinosaurs, including the famous Triceratops, graze peacefully. A lone T-Rex stalks his prey, hidden amongst the tall trees. Suddenly, a small ornithopod dinosaur wanders too far away from the herd and becomes the T-Rex's easy meal. A pair of velociraptors leap through the undergrowth, chasing after a fleeing dinosaur. As the sun sets, our herbivore herd settles down for the night, forming a circle for safety. A family of Edmontosaurs snuggles close, seeking comfort and warmth. In the distance, a T-Rex roars, sending shivers down their spines. From 145 to 66 million years ago, the world looked very different than it does today. The 7 continents we know today weren't arranged the way we're used to, and Earth had changed hands from the reign of archosaurs to the apex of dinosaurs. This period, known as the late Mesozoic era, is what we call the Cretaceous. And this episode will focus on the Cetaceous period, specifically the Cretaceous Kingdom. Welcome back to my channel. Today we'll be looking at some of the incredible dinosaurs that lived during the late Cretaceous period in North America. And if you like dinosaurs, make sure to subscribe for more videos about these fascinating creatures. In the western interior of North America, the Western Interior Seaway once connected the Arctic and Pacific Oceans, creating a vast saltwater sea within the continent. During the Cretaceous period, the Rocky Mountains began to rise, creating new habitats and barriers between species. Most of the dinosaurs found in Canada are from this period. Some of the most popular include the herbivorous Maiasaura. Maiasaura means marsh lizard in Greek, and they were named because of the many fossils that were discovered in marshes and swamps of the area. They lived around 76 to 72 million years ago. They were hadrosaurs, which were mostly plant eaters with duck-like bills and generally four-legged. But Maiasaurs could stand on 2 legs and walked with a distinctive swagger. When threatened, they could flee to the water, where their paddle tail helped them swim with ease. Another hadrosaur was Boreopelta mark-michelli, also known as the turtle dinosaur. Its shell protected it from most predators, and its beak allowed it to eat plants with tough fibers. Their name comes from the Greek word Boreopelta mark-michelli, referring to the shield-like shape of their backs. These dinosaurs lived around 77 million years ago and were discovered in the Dinosaur Park Formation, one of the richest fossil sites in Canada. Another dinosaur found in this area was the fierce Sarcosuchus imperator. Sarcosuchus means flesh crocodile in Greek, and it was the largest known crocodilian ever. They lived between 82 and 78 million years ago, and were approximately 13 meters long, and weighed around 1,100 kilograms. They lived both in and out of water, ambushing unsuspecting prey. Moving south to the United States, We have Daspaltosaurus, a tyrannosaurid. Daspaltosaurus means terrible lizard in Greek and was one of the last tyrannosaurids before T-Rex. They were about 5 meters long and lived in what is now Montana, Wyoming, and North Dakota. They were known for their large head and powerful jaws. One interesting fact is that Daspaltosaurus and Albertosaurus were thought to have hunted together, much like wolves do today. This is rare in the animal world, and scientists think that living in a pack may have helped drive their extinction. Speaking of T-Rex, let's talk about one of the most popular dinosaurs of all time. Tyrannosaurus rex needs no introduction, but we'll go over some facts about its life anyway. They were the true apex predators of their time, standing up to 12 meters long and weighing more than 7,000 kilograms. Their teeth were serrated like steak knives, and their bite was stronger than any other land animal in history. But despite their ferocious appearance, they may have scavenged more than they actually hunted. Their senses of sight and smell were highly developed, and they may have hunted in packs, using teamwork to take down large prey. They lived in what is now the western side of North America, and existed until the asteroid impact that killed off all non-avian dinosaurs. Another carnivore worth mentioning is the horned dino, Ceratopsidae. Ceratopsidae was a group of herbivorous dinosaurs that lived during the late Cretaceous period. The group gets its name from the Greek words keras, meaning horn, and ops, meaning face. They had 2 horns on their nose and a bony frill around their head that was often brightly colored. Ceratopsians lived in what is now western North America, and there were many species, including Triceratops, Styracosaurus, and Centrosaurus. Each species had unique features such as the number and shape of their horns and the bony frill on their neck. Another group of herbivores found in the area was the Ankylosauria. The Ankylosauria group consisted of several kinds of plant-eating dinosaurs that had bony plates along their backs and tails. These plates were made of skin and cartilage, not bone. Many had spikes or quills on their backs and tails, and some were even covered in armor. They ranged in size from small, swift dinosaurs to large, heavily armored dinosaurs. Some of the best-known members of the Ankylosauria include Boreopelta Mark Mitchell, Boreopelta Mark Michelli, 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 Boreopelta Mark Michelli. Boreopelta Mark Michelli, 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 Boreopelta Mark Michelli Boreopelta Mark Michelli, 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 Mark Michelli, Boreopelta 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 Mark Michelli, Boreopelta, 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 Mark Michelli. Boreopelta, Mark Michelli, Boreopelta, Mark Michelli, Boreopelta, Mark Michelli, Boreopelta, Mark Michelli, Mark Michelli, Boreopelta, 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 Mark Michelli, Mark Michelli, Boreopelta, 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 Mark Michelli. Boreopelta, Mark Michelli, 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 Boreopelta, Mark Michelli. Boreopelta, Mark Michelli, 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 Boreopelta, Michelli, Boreopelta, Mark 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 Michelli. Boreopelta, Mark Michelli, 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 Boreopelta, Mark Michelli. Boreopelta, Mark Michelli, Boreopelta, Mark Michelli, Boreopelta, Mark Michelli, Boreopelta, Mark Michelli, Mark Michelli, Boreopelta, 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 Michelli, Boreopelta, Mark Michelli, Boreopelta, Mark Michelli, Boreopelta, Mark Michelli. Boreopelta, Mark Michelli, 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 Boreopelta, Mark Michelli. Boreopelta, Mark Michelli, 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 Boreopelta, Mark Michelli. Boreopelta, Mark Michelli, 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 Boreopelta, Michelli, Boreopelta, Mark Michelli, Boreopelta, Mark Michelli. Boreopelta, Mark Michelli, 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 Boreopelta, Mark Micheli Boreopelta, Mark Micheli Boreopelta, Mark Micheli Boreopelta, Mark Micheli Boreopelta. Micheli Boreopelta, Mark Micheli Boreopelta, Mark Micheli Boreopelta, Mark Micheli Boreopelta, Mark. Micheli Boreopelta, Mark Micheli Bore. It's morning in the Cretaceous period and the sun peeks over the horizon, beginning another day in the life of a dinosaur. Here, a herd of Maiasaura calmly awakens. They stretch, shake off sleep, and prepare to start their day. In the distance, something stirs in the nest. A tiny snout pokes through an egg, announcing the arrival of a new hatchling. Welcome to Life of the Dinosaurs. Today, we are exploring what life was really like for these prehistoric beasts, from parenting and eating habits to migration and mating rituals. Let's get started. We know that Maiasaura led complex family lives because they were one of the few dinosaurs to exhibit signs of parental care. The males built large nests where females would lay their eggs. Then both parents took turns sitting on the eggs to keep them warm until they hatched. After the babies hatched, the parents continued to watch over them, guiding, protecting, and teaching their young ones how to survive in the wild. For instance, scientists have found fossil evidence of Maiasaura mothers carrying food for their babies. These little dinosaurs were dependent on their parents for at least a couple of years after hatching. Like most baby animals, they probably needed a lot of help when it came to hunting and defending themselves against predators. Scientists also think that the adults ushered their offspring toward the best food sources and shielded them from potential dangers. Smaller dinosaurs like the Trudon also nested in groups, suggesting that they relied on numbers for protection and care. Fossilized evidence indicates that these small meat eaters grew up in communal nests with dozens of other hatchlings. A parent would nudge a hatchling back to the nest if it wandered too far away from the group. So not only did smaller dinosaurs grow up in a group setting, but they also benefited from a group of parents watching over them. As we've seen, dinosaurs come in all shapes and sizes. This diversity meant that they ate a wide variety of foods. Some plant-eating dinosaurs, like the Ankylosaurus, preferred to stay close to the ground. Their small heads and necks allowed them to reach tasty plants near the forest floor. Since they were small, they didn't need much food to survive, and they likely grazed quietly, quickly becoming a favorite meal for larger dinosaurs. Other plant eaters like the Triceratops were much more destructive. Their giant frills and three-pronged horns made them instantly recognizable, but also kept other herbivores away. Their beaks and jaws were perfect for uprooting low plants, but they could also use their incredible horns to bulldoze through dense foliage. While Triceratops were usually seen as fierce opponents, they would have been much more effective at eating than fighting. After all, why risk damaging your horns when there are plenty of plants to go around? Meat eaters had completely different eating strategies. While some dinosaurs like the Tyrannosaurus rex were happy to scavenge, others, such as the Velociraptor, actively hunted. One of the largest and most ferocious carnivores that ever lived, Tyrannosaurus rex, was built for chasing prey. Its legs were strong enough to carry its huge body over rough terrain, and its sharp teeth and powerful jaws let it chomp straight through bone to reach the juicy marrow inside. Tyrannosaurus also had one of the strongest bites of all time. Scavenging was just as important to this predator as hunting because it meant that it didn't have to expend energy catching its own food. Sometimes, however, a kill was so big that it attracted lots of scavengers looking for a free meal. Take the Dromaeosaurs, for example. They hunted in packs, taking down larger prey together. They probably fed on the carcass while the prey was still alive, and they would have been able to steal food from other scavengers thanks to their sharp claws and teeth. Not all dinosaurs spent their days looking for food. Some, like the sauropods, were constantly on the move. Sauropods were some of the largest animals that ever lived. The most famous member of this group is Argentinosaurus, which weighed over 70 tons and reached lengths of over 100 feet. Sauropods needed to migrate constantly in search of new food supplies. Plants couldn't support such a huge weight, so they were doomed to roam the earth forever. Most sauropods had long necks that helped them reach high plants that other herbivores couldn't access. But being gigantic and constantly hungry comes with disadvantages too. For example, since they needed to eat so much, they tended to stick out long before they were actually spotted by predators. The constant threat of attack pushed sauropods to travel with herds, ensuring safety in numbers. Some dinosaurs traveled shorter distances each year. The Chromasaurus, a large sauropod, migrated across a vast plain with thousands of other dinosaurs, including lumbering relatives like the Maiasaura and the swift Hadrosaur. The herds followed paths that had been well worn by migrating animals for generations. They probably stuck to familiar landscapes and routes, moving from favorable habitats to more marginal areas until conditions improved again. During these migrations, predators like the Allosaurus hunted the stragglers, making sure that only the healthiest and most energetic animals survived to breed another day. Tracks preserved in stone tell us a lot about migration patterns and animal behavior. By studying fossils, we can learn exactly how fast a dinosaur was moving, whether it was walking or running, and even which direction it was facing when it took a step. We know that some animals traveled alone, while others stuck together. For example, there is a fossil trackway of a Chromasaurus migrating alongside a stream. It looks like the whole herd stayed together during the journey, with adults protecting the young. However, there's also a record of a lone Maiasaura wandering away from the herd. Maybe it was separated from the group, or it was simply looking for a tasty snack along the way. Either way, the adult was stalked by an Allosaurus, which kept pace with it, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. We don't know what happened next because the tracks end abruptly, but we do know that the Allosaurus was a skilled hunter and the Maiasaura was in trouble. Migration is risky business. Dinosaurs faced many obstacles, from flooding to falling rocks and volcanoes. Life on Earth has always been wild, but during the age of dinosaurs, it was taken to a whole new level. Volcanic eruptions could wipe out entire ecosystems. Tsunamis could sweep across continents, and hurricanes could flatten entire forests. Animals had to be ready for anything. And some dinosaurs were better suited to rapid change than others. For example, they preferred dry environments with sparse vegetation, but they were forced to flee when a flash flood struck. Other dinosaurs, such as the Camptosaurus, thrived in swampy, overgrown areas, but they also had to deal with unpredictable weather. When conditions got too dry, these dinosaurs were forced to migrate in search of new homes. But not all dinosaurs were helpless against the elements. Some, like the Parasaurolophus, seem to have flourished in areas affected by volcanic activity. Parasaurolophus preferred hot climates with plenty of moisture, which may have been the result of volcanic ash fertilizing the soil and triggering explosive plant growth. There was plenty of food here, but only for those dinosaurs that could stand the heat. No matter the environment, life was never easy. But dinosaurs adapted to every challenge, from scorching desert heat to swampy jungles to icy forests. They conquered every biome. Even though the dinosaurs became extinct 6 million years ago, their influence still remains today. The very fact that they dominated the planet for over 180 million years shows how well adapted they were to their surroundings. Even without direct descendants, the effects of natural selection that shaped dinosaurs continue to affect the animals around us. But life for a dinosaur wasn't just about surviving. Many of them had elaborate courtship displays and communication tactics. Scientists don't know exactly what dinosaurs sounded like, but we do know that some of them made noises to communicate with each other. One particularly strange sounding dinosaur was Parasaurolophus. It had a long neck, a duck-like bill, and a huge crest that extended from the top of its head. This dinosaur probably used its crest to make loud, echoing honks that carried across foggy swamps and dense forests. These calls may have been used to attract mates, ward off rivals, or alert other Parasaurs of approaching danger. Some dinosaurs used visual displays to attract attention. Male peacocks puff out their feathers in elaborate dances to impress potential partners. Perhaps something similar happened in the Cretaceous. Maybe dinosaurs swayed their crests, quills, or frills in an attempt to win over a mate. There's no way to be sure, but scientists hope that future discoveries will shed light on dinosaur communication. So, what was life like for dinosaurs? Well, it was everything from relaxed family outings to frantic chases across the landscape. It was filled with noisy calls, vibrant colors, and plenty of movement. Life in the age of dinosaurs was exciting, dangerous, and completely unique. But don't forget, they weren't just creatures of muscle and teeth. They were parents, travelers, survivors, and in their own way, rulers of their world. This episode was part of our Dinosaurs series. If you want to see more videos like this, click the link on screen now. Thanks for coming along on this journey through time. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to follow for more prehistoric fun. And remember, life was pretty wild in the age of dinosaurs. This is the title card for this episode, Life of the Dinosaurs, which is about their mind. So let's get started. Oh, we opened this episode with a very curious Truden. It looks up from behind these ferns, blinking rapid fire. So did you catch that? It blinked like really fast, almost as if it's scanning the area, which kind of reminds me of when you scan your surroundings when you're playing a video game. Hey, maybe there's a hidden item or power-up somewhere. Oh, so Truden is looking for something to eat, but it seems like this plant has got nothing to offer. Well, except maybe a juicy little mouse hiding underneath. Ah, but the little mouse is stuck behind a rock, far from the safety of its hole. It needs to be dislodged, but how? Well, one idea is to reach in with its beak and grab the critter by the tail. However, after trying that, the Trojan shakes his head in disapproval. Wait, better try to push it out instead. And sure enough, eventually the mouse is knocked free. This Trojan must have known that rock would come loose because he's been studying the situation for quite some time, just like this guy who studies dinosaur behavior today. In fact, this whole scene was filmed at a zoo in China where the bird took almost half an hour to solve this problem. But once it did, it was rewarded with a delicious snack. Could Truden have done this too? Maybe not Truden. Truden was a smaller dino that roamed what's now Western North America. What set it apart was its giant brain. When adjusted for body mass, it had one of the biggest relative brain sizes of any dinosaur. At least 40% larger than its close relative, the chicken. Yes, that's right. Your average barnyard fowl is related to dinosaurs. They're technically known as avian dinosaurs. Birds evolved from feathered theropods, which include famous carnivores like Velociraptor. But this Truden was different. Its big brain suggests it was highly intelligent, possibly capable of problem solving. In other words, a real live wire. Today, animals that share certain behavioral traits are used as models to help us understand dinosaurs. For example, Truden's brain is similar to that of modern birds like crows, jays, and parrots, which are known for their intelligence. Parrots can use tools and recognize themselves in mirrors. Their intelligence means they can even solve puzzles to get rewards. See, some dinosaurs might have been as birds. I wonder what else Truden had going for it. Well, back to our Truden. Now that it has its prize, it tilts its head to examine its prey before gobbling it up. And don't worry, Truden wasn't always such a cute little genius. As a baby, it had a much more modest brain size than an adult, indicating rapid growth spurts during maturity. But since Truden lived alongside other meat eaters, it needed to develop quickly to survive. You see, while many dinosaurs had excellent senses, evolution honed the ability to perceive danger or find food. And without a doubt, Truden had incredible eyesight. With its large eye sockets and bony eyebrow ridges, it saw the world in fine detail. Plus, its eyes faced forward, meaning it had binocular vision, which makes depth perception easy. Binocular vision lets animals judge distances between objects, a useful tool for hunters and their prey. Take these falcons. They use their binocular vision to dive accurately at high speeds toward their target. That's why predators like Velociraptor had forward-facing eyes too, as well as brains that were relatively bigger than their prey. But wait, there's more to sight than being able to see clearly. Studies show that some dinosaurs could see colors we can't, like ultraviolet, which could help identify plants and animals visible to us. And while Truden's eyes had great resolution, other dinos had another trick. Look here, these are the eye sockets of two ancient relatives of Ankylosaurus. The top socket belonged to Boreopelta markmicheli. It had a huge field of view, perfect for spotting threats from far away. This ability developed independently from the wide-eyed look of modern birds and crocodiles. That's right, crocodiles. Crocodiles are dinosaurs' closest living relatives, sharing around 80% of their DNA. So understanding how they see the world gives us insight into how dinosaurs may have seen things too. Like crocodiles, dinosaurs had slit-shaped pupils that could contract, expanding their field of view. This feature helped them track moving objects like prey or predators. In fact, these guys have such wide-set eyes that they can see above and below them without turning their heads. That's handy for finding tasty fish, but it also comes in handy when on land. See, it means they don't have to lift their heads off the ground to see if there's anything approaching them. Speaking of raising your head, have you ever noticed that a snake does that to smell? Well, some dinosaurs were built similarly. They had raised snouts. Here's a close-up of a relative of Ankylosaurus. See this notch on its skull right here? It's part of a passage connecting the outside world to the olfactory bulb, which is responsible for smell. Animals use their sense of smell to locate food, mates, and even communicate. But smell requires sniffing, lifting your nose, and then inhaling. That's why it's hard to breathe and smell at the same time. So some dinosaurs evolved to solve this problem. Having a raised snout allowed them to smell without lifting their heads off the ground. And it appears to have been an independent evolutionary event, since the last common ancestor of Ankylosaurus and its close relatives probably didn't have this trait. Instead, it likely inherited the raised snout from an older group of reptiles called archosaurs, which includes crocodilians and the ancestors of mammals. So you could say that some dinosaurs smelled like dogs. But one dino was the king of smelling. The olfactory region of Tyrannosaurus rex was humongous, way bigger than modern birds and even some mammals. This meant it had an outstanding sense of smell, which helped it find food. It could sniff out carcasses miles away, which made it both a formidable predator and a picky eater. After all, you don't want to waste energy catching prey that isn't worth eating. And T-Rex wasn't just a super smeller. It was also a sound detective. Fossils of Maiasaura reveal evidence of hollow crests that might have amplified sounds. That's right, like a megaphone. These dinosaurs were early relatives of the famous Parasaurolophus. Their crests may have acted as resonators, creating a sort of bugle to amplify their calls. Sound travels through air and can carry long distances. That's why some dinosaurs like Maiasaura had crests to boost their voices. This allowed them to communicate across vast herds, warn others of danger, or attract potential partners. In fact, recent research suggests that some dinosaurs roared. Sounds like roaring may have been a form of sexual selection, a way to attract mates and intimidate rivals. These days, roaring is mostly done by big cats and big apes. But some extinct species of dinosaurs produced loud noises too, including Ankylosaurus and Ouranosaurus, which had crests that may have helped amplify sounds. In fact, modern birds still make plenty of noise. Some use learned vocalizations to mimic other birds or even sounds from other animals. While they're at it, some birds like mockingbirds and parrots can even copy human speech. In short, dinosaurs likely had keen senses, enabling them to hunt, find food, communicate, and survive. Some were intelligent, demonstrating awareness, memory, emotion, and even playfulness. Studying dinosaurs helps us understand ourselves and the amazing creatures we share this planet with today. And speaking of today, that's all for today. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe if you haven't already. You can also check out previous episodes and leave us a comment. And finally, remember to keep thinking like a scientist. Okay, everyone. Dinosaur fans have been waiting for this moment for a very long time. And we're not talking about the return of Jurassic World Dominion in theaters, but the last episode of Life of the Dinosaurs. Episode 6, The End of the Dinosaurs. This is it. So grab your paleontology gear because we're going back in time to see how the age of the dinosaurs ended. And don't forget, stay until the end to get some exclusive sneak peeks. Late Cretaceous period, North America, 70 million years before the mass extinction event. The sun sets over a meandering river. A large herd of Triceratops amble out of the forest to feed. Among them is a formidable young male sporting impressive horns and a frill adorned with several large bumps or bosses. He parades around his potential mates, hoping to impress them. Not far away, a Tyrannosaurus stalks his prey. moving like a tank through tall grasses. His sensitive nostrils flare as he sniffs the air for signs of prey. But for now, there's only the smell of sagebrush and dirt. Our young Triceratops has managed to escape his attention. In the distance, something strange streaks across the sky, growing larger and brighter with every passing moment. It's about the size of a house and leaves a white trail behind it. No one notices. The Triceratops continues its evening feeding routine. The predator lies down to rest. Suddenly, the object in the sky explodes in a blinding flash of light. Both the dinosaur and the unsuspecting Triceratops raise their heads in surprise. The young dino lets out a startled snort. It's too late. Everything goes black. So why do we know so much about the asteroid impact that killed off the dinosaurs? Because it didn't just wipe out dinosaurs, it also left behind an abundance of evidence. For example, the Chicxulub crater in Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula. This 180-kilometer wide scar on the Earth is the impact site of the asteroid. But it took years of scientific investigation to connect this crater with the demise of the dinosaurs. That's because the asteroid struck about 30 million years before the first oil well was drilled. And even then, scientists didn't immediately realize that asteroids could cause mass extinctions. A few dozen miles from the impact site, ankylosaurs are busy searching for plants to eat. These herbivorous dinosaurs are related to the armadillos and have bodies covered with protective armor. One of the ankylosaurs suddenly falls to the ground, convulsing violently. Its neck bends at an unnatural angle, and its eyes roll back in its head. Another ankylosaur runs frantically in circles, kicking up dust. But there's no escape from whatever is happening to them. All the ankylosaurs in the area drop to the ground, dead. Within hours, the forest is littered with their lifeless bodies. Tsunamis, earthquakes, wildfires. When the asteroid hit Earth, its impact triggered a series of catastrophic events. First, the asteroid blast wave radiated outwards, generating powerful winds and flattening everything in sight. Then the heat from the explosion ignited trees and vegetation, which burned for weeks. Finally, massive tsunamis hundreds of meters high crashed into coastlines, inundating the land. If any dinosaur is fortunate enough to survive the impact or the fires, they would have perished in these waves. The air grows heavy with smoke and ash. Birds struggle to fly through the gloom, their wings coated with debris. As the sky darkens, a thick layer of dust and pulverized rock accumulates on the ground. Animals trapped in burrows or caves are unable to escape the suffocating darkness. Meanwhile, the survivors who remain outside desperately search for food and water. But their efforts are in vain. The familiar landscape has been transformed into a desolate wasteland. Herbivores such as the duck-billed hadrosaurs begin to die from starvation. Faced with dwindling food supplies, carnivores like the fearsome T-Rex turn to cannibalism, killing and consuming other dinosaurs. Even the mighty T-Rex, however, cannot defy the laws of nature forever. As their strength ebbs, the kings of the dinosaurs become desperate, staggering around and crashing to the ground. Unable to bear the suffering any longer, some Triceratops seek a merciful end, falling on their swords, if you will, by intentionally ramming themselves against rocks or trees. Others wander aimlessly, too weak to move on or fight. Many simply collapse and die where they stand. The number of species alive at the beginning of the Cretaceous period was roughly equal to that at the end of the Jurassic. However, at the end of the Cretaceous, there were almost no species left. By the end of the Cretaceous, the asteroid impact, along with its far-reaching consequences, had caused the extinction of approximately 75% of all plant and animal species on Earth, including the dinosaurs. Only those organisms that were small, agile, adaptable, and capable of rapid reproduction survived. Feathered dinosaurs like Archaeopteryx were among the lucky ones. With their wings, feathers, and beak, they were perfectly suited for life in a post-impact world. While most of their relatives met their end, these small protobirds survived and went on to become the ancestors of modern birds. Today, over 10,000 species of birds exist worldwide. Every one of them is a direct descendant of the surviving feathered dinosaurs. This means that birds are literally the living dinosaurs. So did the asteroid really kill off all the dinosaurs? Well, not technically. Remember, it wasn't just the impact itself, but also the subsequent environmental changes that spelled doom for most species. After the impact, a thick cloud of debris blocked the sun's rays and plunged the Earth into darkness. Photosynthesis ground to a halt, and so did the food supply for herbivorous dinosaurs. There wasn't enough food for the carnivores either. The sudden climate change was too drastic for most animals to adapt to. However, some species with efficient metabolisms and flexible diets survived. Even though mammals were still relatively small, they quickly diversified after the extinction of dinosaurs. They began to occupy various ecological niches once held by dinosaurs. 65 million years after the asteroid impact, mammals had already become the dominant terrestrial vertebrates. The ecological vacancy left by the dinosaurs allowed them to thrive. So, although mammals were around during the reign of the dinosaurs, they lived in the shadow of these giants. Only after the Cretaceous Paleogene extinction event did mammals truly come into their own. So, what does the timeline of the death of the dinosaurs look like? The asteroid impact marks the beginning of the end for the dinosaurs. Immediately following the impact, there was a brief but intense period of destruction with massive earthquakes, tsunamis, and wildfires. The energy from the impact heated the Earth's surface, setting forests ablaze. Trees and vegetation were incinerated, releasing massive amounts of smoke into the atmosphere. This led to a prolonged period of darkness as the smoke and dust blocked sunlight, causing global temperatures to plummet. It got so bad that for years, maybe even decades, photosynthesis couldn't occur, leading to collapse of the food chain. As the dust settled and temperatures began to stabilize, a new ecosystem emerged. Only the most adaptable species survived, giving rise to new ecological dynamics. But the effects of the impact extended beyond the immediate environment. The asteroid's impact triggered a mass extinction event, wiping out an estimated 75% of all plant and animal species, including the dinosaurs. However, some smaller species like birds and mammals, which were less impacted by the sudden environmental changes, were able to flourish in the aftermath. So, what caused the extinction of the dinosaurs? Several factors contributed to the dinosaurs' demise. First, there was the asteroid impact itself. The collision caused immediate devastation in the surrounding areas. The impact triggered earthquakes, tsunamis, and wildfires that devastated vast stretches of land. Second, the impact led to significant climate change. The massive amount of dust and debris thrown into the atmosphere blocked sunlight, leading to a prolonged period of darkness and global cooling. This disruption in the climate and the resulting food shortage played a major role in the extinction of the dinosaurs. Third, there was the ecological imbalance. The death of countless plant and animal species created a ripple effect throughout the ecosystem. The disappearance of herbivores led to the decline of carnivores that depended on them for food. Fourth, there were the non-avian dinosaurs' inability to adapt. The sudden and drastic environmental changes overwhelmed the dinosaurs' adaptive capacity. Their large size, slow reproductive rates, and dependence on stable ecosystems made them particularly vulnerable to the rapid changes that followed the asteroid impact. However, it's important to note that the asteroid impact was the catalyst for this chain of events. In isolation, none of these factors would have been enough to cause such a mass extinction. And that's it, folks. The end of the dinosaurs, an epic conclusion to a truly remarkable journey through time. We hope you enjoyed reliving the Triassic, Jurassic, and Cretaceous periods and learning about the fascinating world of dinosaurs. But our journey doesn't have to end here. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more incredible paleontological adventures. What do you think happened to the dinosaurs after the mass extinction? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And that's all for this episode. Until next time, keep exploring and stay curious. Thanks for watching.